I'll ask folks to grab one more cup of coffee and ask the speakers for our morning plenary to come on up, take the stage. And while they're doing, good morning. While they're doing that, well, so I hope everyone had a wonderful evening. It was so much fun to hang out and talk last night in the bar and visit with folks, and really excellent sessions yesterday. Tremendously enjoyed hearing about the different ways that people are putting OpenET to work, and also thought that some of the training sessions that Will and Jordan and Alberto were running were excellent. Hope folks got a lot of value out of those. We'll be continuing to offer those types of training moving forward. So this morning we're going to hear about some of the applications from our federal and state partners. Without these partnerships and support, it would be very, very difficult to keep OpenET going. So we're incredibly grateful to our state and federal partners, not only for their time, for being thought partners, for their patience with us as we work through technical issues and work to make the data better, but also for the ongoing support for OpenET. I'd like to begin by asking Tony Willardson to offer a few thoughts and perspectives. Tony is the Executive Director for the Western States Water Council, and he has served the Western States through the Council for getting close to, well, we'll just say for a long time.
Forrest asked me if it was right.
Yeah.
He asked me if it was correct that I'd been with the Council since 1979, and that's true.
And his service has been exemplary. Tony has been a longtime advocate of effective use of data and information to advance sustainable, mutually beneficial solutions to longstanding water management challenges. He has been one of the strongest and most effective advocates for use of remote sensing data and Landsat in particular. For all of us who use and benefit from the thermal infrared information from Landsat 8, we largely have Tony to thank for spearheading that effort to ensure that that instrument flew on Landsat 8 and continued to be supported through the NASA and USGS partnership. So with that, let me turn it over to Tony, along with my heartfelt thanks for all of your work and service.
Thanks, Forrest. The Council is a government entity that was created by the governors in 1965 to represent them related to water policy and, as an advisory body. And our members are appointed by the governors and serve at their pleasure. Actually, Jim Snyder here from Nebraska is a former member of the Council. It's great to be here with many of you that I've known over the years, and I appreciate this opportunity. And want to thank Maurice and Rachel and Robin and all those who have put this program together. It's been great. So the Council itself was created, and I'll read our mission statement, to ensure that the West has an adequate, secure, and sustainable supply of water of suitable quality to meet its diverse economic environmental needs now and in the future. So just a small task, particularly since we've been in a drought in much of the West for the last 20 years. But I want to mention that as part of our principles, too, we call for recognizing the value of water and how critical it is to our way of life here. And one of our principles as well is that all levels of government must prioritize the collection, analysis, and open sharing of reliable data regarding water availability, quality, and usage, given its importance for research and for sound science and data-driven decision-making. So we think that's a foundation of everything that we do when it comes to water in the West. I also want to point out that it's appropriate that we are meeting here on tribal lands. One of the challenges that we face in the West is many of our water rights are not all that well defined. And I'll mention that a little bit, but that includes federal and tribal water rights. And we have worked for over 3 decades with the Native American Rights Fund. And John Echohawk, the executive director, who is from Albuquerque and Oklahoma, we'll get both states a call out, in trying to negotiate and get Congress to approve tribal water rights settlements. I also wanted to mention that at the request of Western governors, we've created what we call our Western Federal Agency Support Team. And we have 15 different agencies that have named a point of contact to work with the council on some of our joint challenges. That team is led by Chris Carlson with the Forest Service. Chris is here with us today. And Forrest also participates in what we call our WestFast team. The council became involved with remote sensing and NASA in 2007, as Forrest mentioned. NASA had determined that because of weight and cost, they were going to eliminate the thermal infrared imager from Landsat 8. We became involved because of the interest of the state of Idaho, and Rick Allen is here, a good friend. We've worked together for many years. He, along with Tony Morse with the Idaho Department of Water Resources, were pioneers in using remote sensing from Landsat in measuring and monitoring water use. And as we all know, it's hard to manage what you can't measure. So the council was instrumental in convincing the Congress that this should be funded, and restoring funding and ensuring that that imager was on Landsat 8. It was we had bipartisan support. I've said I don't know if we could do that again. We actually had 12 Western senators who signed a letter to the Appropriations Committee that got that funding restored to NASA. 6 of those were Republicans and 6 of those were Democrats. I also want to mention just briefly that I'd encourage your support as we continued to work on Landsat Next. Landsat Next is currently scheduled to be launched in 2030. We're concerned about funding for both NASA and USGS to ensure that that happens and that Landsat Next will be available before the demise of Landsat 8, which will be nearing its design life. And I'd encourage all of you to express your support for funding for NASA and GS for Landsat Next, as that will, as all of ET, OpenET depends on the information that we have from Landsat. So I also wanted to mention that the council, as in working to define water rights in the West, have developed a database of 2.5 million water rights and the metadata related to that in all of our 18 member states. And as a next step, one of the huge gaps in our data is consumptive use. For those of you familiar with Western water law, it's based on reasonable consumptive use and not diversions. And so determining what that is has been a challenge. It's been usually done by engineering calculations, but obviously with the advent of new tools like OpenET, we can do more. And we're looking at opportunities now to integrate OpenET data with our water rights data, and I think you'll see some expressions of what's being done by this panel. And doing that in the future. And we're looking for financial partners to help us accomplish that. So our goal then is really to facilitate voluntary, compensated, temporary transfers of water where that can benefit both ranchers and farmers and others, and can help fill some of the gaps when it comes to our water needs. I'm looking forward to hearing from this panel, and again, I appreciate everyone that's put this together, I'm looking forward to all that we can do in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. The council has been a really important partner for NASA, for OpenET, and an important convening body that helps us come to consensus and move towards consensus on developing solutions to problems like monitoring consumptive use. So thank you for your longtime leadership as executive director. Next, I'd like to introduce Jack Eggleston. Jack is a hydrologist with the USGS Water Mission Area, and he is chief of the Hydrologic Remote Sensing Branch. Jack leads the USGS efforts to develop and apply remote sensing methods to observe inland water resources, and his work at USGS focuses on helping understand and manage water utilities, state, federal, and international government agencies better understand and manage water resources. And Jack, along with Toby Wellburn, are two of the most patient people I know. As we've learned through the transition process for OpenET, federal agencies have their own distinct personalities and operating styles, and Jack and Toby have been instrumental in helping us work effectively between NASA and USGS to develop a much more sustainable long-term path for OpenET. I'm really grateful to Jack for his leadership and partnership, and I'll let him describe ways that OpenET is being used within USGS. Thanks.
Okay, thanks so much, Forrest. Let's see if I can figure out how to use this. Okay, so USGS is a partner in multiple ways with OpenET. So I'm very happy we have a number of us here at the workshop this week. It's been a real pleasure as we've gotten more and more involved in OpenET in a way that hopefully will help it become a federal and federally funded operational system that has more certainty and longevity with regards to funding and operations. So I'll talk a bit about how USGS works with OpenET data. I want to thank collaborators, many of whom are here: Mac Friedrich, Stephen Hunt, Rich Neiswanger, Jamie Painter, Toby Wellborn, and Jordan Wilson. All right. So I'll give an overview of the USGS mission, and particularly of the water mission area. So USGS has about 8,000 employees, and a little under half of those are in the water mission area, and in the many water science centers around the states. So our mission is to work with partners to to monitor, assess, and conduct targeted research, and to deliver information on a wide variety of water resources and conditions, including stream flow, groundwater, water quality, water use, and water availability. Within that framework, we have a few key traits. One is that we're a science agency, so unlike Bureau of Reclamation or Bureau of Land Management, we don't we don't manage water, we don't control any reservoirs or dams or locks. We also don't regulate water, so unlike the EPA, we don't tell people that they're doing something wrong, so we're just a science agency. We collect and manage and publish lots and lots of water data. I think we're maybe most well known for our stream flow data, but we also do water levels and water quality, and increasingly remotely sensed water data as well. We also do a lot of investigative studies, research, so we analyze the data, publish conclusions based on it. And then we have a lot of outreach across the country to state, local, and regional agencies. These include water supply utilities, wastewater utilities, and it's a total of about 1,500 of these other agencies. Okay, with regards to OpenET, we're both a participant. So we are supporting research by many partners in the consortium. We developed one of the models with Gabriel Sine's leadership, the CBOT model. And then we're preparing for this, Congress willing, for this national scale operational data production. We're also a user of OpenET data. We use it in some of our national programs for water availability assessments, water use monitoring and modeling, and then for focused hydrologic studies. Okay, so 3 of our larger programs. One is the water use program. We have the responsibility to gather all the information that's available or possible for how water is used in the United States. As many of you know, the agricultural use of water is particularly challenging to assess accurately. So OpenET has been used for a number of years by the water use program. The water budget program, along the same lines of trying to assess the components, all the components of the water budget. ET has always traditionally been the hardest one, along with recharge, but very hard to measure over wide areas. And then our water availability assessment program is doing focused studies in a number of basins. So I'll give a couple of examples here. One of them is within the water use program. We recently published a data product which is groundwater and surface water withdrawals according to the HUC 12 basin groupings. So we start with our land ID data set, which is a data set indicating 30-meter raster scale where farm fields and irrigated farm fields are. We've combined that with the CBOP evapotranspiration data, and then combined it with a water balance model, and that gives us the irrigation consumptive use for the whole U.S. Then we make some assumptions, some modeling about the system efficiencies and the conveyances of water, and that gets us down to irrigation withdrawals. And then we parse those into surface water and groundwater withdrawals and get to the final end product of these HUC 12 based groundwater and surface water withdrawals. And we currently do that on an annual temporal basis, but we have the goal of moving to monthly and daily assessments. Okay, one other example within the water use program of using OpenET data is with assessing outdoor water use. This is also very difficult to assess because it can be a combination of groundwater withdrawals as well as municipal water that contributes to these outdoor water uses, and it can be very hard to separate out what's what across the landscape. So OpenET is providing a very valuable foundation for figuring out these outdoor water use numbers. Okay, a couple examples from our focused hydrologic studies. These are done not at the national scale, but typically at a basin scale, which could be a very small basin, or it could be a regional study that's done. So 2 examples here. One is a model of the Great Basin. This was done by the California Water Science Center with the help of the other affected states, Nevada and Idaho and Oregon. And so there's a publication there where you can see the results from that. And again, the OpenET data was critical for pinning down that very hard to characterize component of the water cycle. Another smaller example is in Idaho. That's a groundwater model. This is in the Snake River Plain. This is an early stage study that's ongoing. And for calibrating groundwater models, the ET is a very difficult component typically. So the availability of the OpenET data across the country is extremely useful for our groundwater modeling efforts. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much.
This morning we'll take questions at the end of the panel. I do thank you very much, Jack. I will say USGS from the very beginning has been a critical partner, and especially the work on CBOP by Gabriel Sine and Mac Friedrichs and Gabe Parrish has been important, not just in terms of the contribution to the OpenET ensemble and the capabilities and the work with USGS, but also it's been a wonderful model for us in terms of documentation, open source software repositories, how we describe data, and USGS has really been an important partner in helping us think through the mechanics of how we make move OpenET closer and closer to being an operational, well-documented, validated system. So USGS has, just so much gratitude to USGS and our partners there. Next, I'd like to introduce Jim Prairie, who leads the Research and Modeling Group in Reclamation's Upper Colorado River Basin. He has been with Reclamation since 2000, stationed at the University of Colorado Center for Advanced Decision Support for Water and Environmental Systems. His team leads studies and research in the Colorado River Basin for short and midterm operations and long-term water resources planning, seeking to better understand climate vulnerability and advance decision support under deep uncertainty, which is hopefully just slightly less deep now that we have a consistent measure of consumptive use across all upper basin states. So, Jim.
Thank you, Forrest. Will present slides just pop up, or do I have to do something? Look at that. Nice. Okay. So what I'd like to do is just walk you through what we do with consumptive use and loss reporting and how OpenET fits into that. On the right-hand side, you're seeing our latest published public consumptive use and loss report. It covers 2016 to 2020. And this report right now is what we're working to advance and come up with some new data for. So what this report's required by the Colorado River Basin Project Act of 1968. This was the act that put in place the Central Arizona Project, but at the same time they recognized we needed better data to continue to do long-term planning. So one of the requirements is that Reclamation needs to report consumptive use and losses, beneficial consumptive use and losses in both the upper and lower basin tributaries beginning in 1971. These reports are put out every 5 years and cover data annually. This is the only set of consistent data in the Upper Colorado River Basin reporting consumptive use. So right now, each of the states has their own method. We have recently agreed to come up with a method we use together, but previously we were each using different methods, and we didn't have a universal way to look at consumptive uses and losses other than this report. The data from this report at the finest scale is available at an 8-digit HUC monthly scale. That's the scale we need for our long-term planning. We use different scales for reporting, and I'll speak a little bit about why this is critical for our long-term planning. For the reporting level, we only need annual data, and we look at what really we term a state major tributary. So the major tributaries are denoted on the map on the right. We've got the Green River, the upper main stem of the Colorado River, and then the San Juan Colorado River in the lower portion. And then we have 5 basin states. We have Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. Those all have a portion of their lands within the Upper Colorado River Basin. When we look at this for longer-term planning, what this figure on the left is showing is the consumptive use from 1971 to 2020. That's the current record we have of consumptive use and loss data. And on the right-hand side of that figure on the left, we're actually showing a projection into the future. The projection really feeds off the consumptive use information to develop that top line on the left that represents our demand in the basin. And then that clouded region is actually showing a modeled view of given a certain set of hydrologies. These are what we call our stress test hydrologies, which run from about 1998 through 2020. And given those hydrologies, that demand above, this is the use the model projects. And you can see there's a range of use, and it varies according to the hydrology that comes in. But we can see we have a close tie to that historical consumptive use versus what the model is producing as potential future use given a certain supply. And then within this model, we can play with different alternatives of how to operate the system and see the impacts of this on reservoirs like Powell and Meade. What we're showing here are the categories that are covered in that report. So there's 8 major categories. On the right-hand side, I'm showing a bar plot of the contribution of each of those categories. And I'll note the 3 top categories, irrigated agriculture, exports, and major reservoirs, cover 92% of the total consumptive use in the basin. So if we can better capture our knowledge of those three categories, that'll be critical to being able to improve consumptive use and loss reporting. So we're going to focus on that irrigated ag piece, which covers about 63% of that total consumptive use. Historically, what we've been doing is we've been using a modified Blaney-Criddle method, which others have actually come up to me and said, I'm kind of been the spokesperson of, this is a method that was built in the 50s, we're still using it, science has advanced, but yet we have not. So really, we have been working to say, how can we move beyond this and be able to use more state-of-the-art information? Irrigated ag is another component that we've been exploring. We relied on 3 different data sets to develop our irrigated acreage estimates, and those were county ag statistics, the natural census of ag, and then GIS snapshots that were taken usually every 5 to 6 years. They've gotten quicker, but one of the problems with these data sets is they're not available rapidly. It usually takes up to a year after the end of the growing season to get these data sets complete. One of the goals we have is being able to produce these consumptive use reports within 4 months of the end of the previous year, so by April 1, so really 3 months. So really bringing in this new type of science is helping us speed up this process. So why advance? Here are some of the key points of what we wanted to acknowledge when we were working on this. One of them is just this recognition we're all using different methods, the upper division states versus reclamation. We wanted to see if we can come up with a unified method. We wanted to move away from the modified Blaney-Criddle method, and we wanted to get to that state-of-the-art science. We wanted to see, we saw these remote sensing methods could actually start to directly measure water use rather than looking at a potential use, having to estimate shortage. That got much trickier. We felt this was a more direct way to estimate what's actually happening on the ground. And then again, that timing. We needed to be able to do this by April 1, so we needed it within 3 months of the end of the previous calendar year. And then lastly, we wanted this to be something that is well documented, defensible, and really can stand on its own when looked at by other entities outside of the Colorado River Basin, looked at by academics, and those are all goals we had through this process. And that brought us to an effort that we began in 2012, so it's really an over 10-year effort. In 2012, we started recognizing remote sensing was primed to maybe help us, but we weren't comfortable that it was yet there. So we started assessing, could remote sensing actually be used in the basin? And we initially did this really looking at just 2 methods, looking at SSE-BOP and looking at metric. So we went to the experts. We brought in Gabriel Sine, we brought in Rick Allen, and then we also worked with Justin Huntington, now Chris Pearson, to help us integrate their tools at the Upper Colorado River Basin scale. And that was the key thing. We had never really done this at that production scale. So we wanted to start exploring this, and this was very methodical. Beginning in 2017, we actually began to do full production scale runs of SSE-BOP, EE metric. We also looked at Pemmican-Monteith with ET demands, and then also the modified Blaney-Criddle, and we intercompared all of these models from 2017 to 2020. And it took those 4 years to let folks get comfortable with the differences we were seeing, because they were not the same result. Through that process, we watched EE metric develop, we watched SSE-BOP learn from what we did, and they changed and they evolved. And we expect that to be a continuing process. So that's a key thing with the new procedure we're going to put in place. We want to continue to move with science. But that is not something we've been comfortable with. So we had to get used to that idea. And then also what we did is we had this opportunity that through this period, OpenET came about. We heard about it, we saw it. Luckily, Justin was very heavily involved with Forrest, and we were like, can we have you guys start looking at our basin in your framework and see how it compares to what we've been doing with you for metric and SSE-BOP already? And that's a key thing that we were able to do. In the final report we produced in 2022, we actually have the figure here in an appendix that's pretty deep in there, Appendix G. But in that appendix, we actually show this OpenET comparison. The 2 bars on the far right, the orange and red, kind of the darker orange, those are actually the metric and SSE-BOP runs we did in our effort. And then everything else is from OpenET, including the first 2, which are the OpenET versions, sorry, that's the second and third, the OpenET versions of EE metric and SSE-BOP. And you'll see they're different than what we were seeing out of our effort. So that's just a recognition that it was evolving. And this is actually the OpenET that I will mess up versioning number, maybe version 2, where They came out with a new version since then, and it's refined a bit. So again, we're still seeing the science evolving, and we expect that to continue. And we're really trying to set up our stakeholders to understand that that's part of this, is that we want to continue to work. One of the key things we did is when we worked from 2012 to 2017, we recognized we needed better instrumentation on the ground to support ground truthing and supporting these data. We added 12 new weather stations to build a network of about over 60 weather stations that can support a Penman-Monteith algorithm. We also put up 4 permanent eddy covariance towers. We tried to place those to basically capitalize on overlap in the Landsat images, and we were able to use those to help us ground truth how these systems were performing. So on the right-hand side is a figure showing you those 60+ weather stations, and then we also have the 4 eddy covariance towers in there. But what we did is we went through this effort to do the intercomparison, and it allowed us to look at the SSEBI metric and then 2 crop coefficient methods. Look at that Penman-Monteith and modified Blaney-Criddle. And through this effort and relying on that 2017 to 2020 intercomparisons, we had the eddy covariance towers to give us some very minimal locations. We were kind of talking about it. It's probably less than 1% of the land area we're trying to cover. We're looking at 1 million to 1.5 million acres of irrigated lands in any given year. And we have these 4 towers that helped us get a sense. We didn't use those alone to make a choice. We used those along with knowledge of the way the models were performing them in upper elevations. And we ended up coming with the number that, or the finding that E metric was best performing for us. We looked at the ensemble approach, but for the Upper Colorado River Basin, the OpenET team agreed with us that it wasn't quite there yet. There was too much variability between the different methods, and methods that weren't well performing were actually pushing our ensemble average down below what we thought was reasonable. So that brought us to choosing one with a recognition that as they improve these models and we've seen them come together, we may move to the ensemble in the future. One of the other key things we did is we recognized that irrigated acreage was an important part. We didn't have a good way to estimate it. So Chris Pearson and Blake with DRI came up with a method that relied on NDVI. It worked with the harmonized Landsat Sentinel data set from 2016 forward, and then worked with OpenET data doing an evaporative fraction of ET for 2015 back to 1991. Because we're working to recompute from 1991 all the way to 2022. And with this effort, which was NDVI based, we now could classify max extents acreage lands between irrigated, shorted, and fallowed. And what we want to do is we want to mask out those fallowed and only include the irrigated and shorted. And we see that vary every year. This has been performing well. And later today, my colleague Andrew Volkner is going to speak some more about the details of this method. Maybe the key thing I'd like to end on is just the data sharing piece. This is a big effort on our part too, and it has its own hurdles. Right now, the way we do this, we work with a series of 50+ Excel workbooks, some of them linked, some not, but they manage all the data from all those 8 categories. It's extremely cumbersome. So we've been working to move that data into a Oracle database. We've got the historical data moved in. Now we're working to learn how to work with it. And we basically are gonna have to hire staff to help us manage this data better. But it was a huge step to just get the database up and running, get the data into it. We're beginning to work with it. The goal is to really have that database do many of the computations we need for consumptive use and losses. We'll load the source data for information we have for many of those categories, excluding irrigated ag. Irrigated ag will live in the OpenET framework, but the results of that will be moved into this database. And then we'll be able to do computations to get to the consumptive use that we need for the reporting level, annual, major trib by state, and for modeling, which is really monthly by 8-digit HUC. And then the other key piece is we believe this database will hopefully improve our QA/QC. We'll be able to build more tools that work off of that to let us QA/QC through all the data. And then lastly, I'll just show, this is from the 2016 to 20 report. This is how we report some of the data. This is showing the major tributary information. And our plans are, hopefully later this year, we're going to release a 2021 through 2023 report, and we'll be replacing the 2019 through 2020 with this new OpenET data that we have presently released a kind of final draft to the states. They're reviewing it. We'll address questions over the next month, hope to resolve those, and then be able to publish that data. And then ultimately it comes up with information like this, where you're seeing the blue at the bottom is the irrigated ag component of consumptive use. And we expect that to be updated from 91 through 2023 by the end of this year, is really what we're shooting for. I think that's it. I'd like to thank really the OpenET team for helping us get to this milestone. It's really a huge milestone for us.
Thank you very much, Jim. I mean, when we first got started trying to support, this was one of the most important use cases and one that I could not be happier to be at this point with. I think some of the comments from Sarah Larson yesterday to me about sort of the value of having a shared basis for planning and decision making moving forward, so you can move past like trying to understand differences between different methods and focus on solutions. I mean, that's why we did this. So that was really meaningful for me. The other thing is during the drought, folks would ask me, because I knew I worked on water and remote sensing, like, what did I think about the Colorado River Basin? What was going to happen? Was I hopeful? And I always said yes, because I think about the meetings that I've sat in on with Jim and Andrew and Chris Pearson and Blake Miner and the team at Reclamation, and just the thoughtfulness and dedication and creativity of people working through the technical problems like always gives me hope. It is such a talented, committed team that always has good ideas and is always working towards solutions. It's really fun to observe. And speaking of innovative and dedicated people, I would like to introduce Rachel Musil next. Rachel is the water supply manager for the Central Utah Water Conservancy District, where she holds responsibility for managing and safeguarding the district's water rights and supplies. Her role encompasses overseeing programs related to water right and water stock acquisitions, as well as spearheading water conservation initiatives that may involve purchasing water. Rachel has been involved in planning new water development projects with a focus on bolstering water supply, and she has been instrumental in developing water planning and accounting models to enhance operational efficiency. And so, Rachel, I do want to say, so at the Colorado River Hydrology Working Group workshop last fall, because everyone, which was at at your facility there in Salt Lake City, everyone else had a conflict. So I ended up presenting on the Utah-Colorado River Accounting and Forecasting System, somewhat to my chagrin, having done that in your own building. But I know I could see the look of envy in all the other states' eyes to see this system developing, and I think it's a really impressive and innovative system. So I will let you describe the work that's happening in Utah.
Thanks, Forrest. Morning, everyone. As Forrest just introduced me, I am Rachel Musil. I'm the water supply manager at Central Utah Water Conservancy District. Central Utah Water Conservancy District operates and maintains the federal Central Utah project of the Bonneville Unit, which conveys water trans-basin to the Wasatch Front in Utah for M&I and municipal use, or municipal and agricultural uses. Because Central gets a large portion of its water supply from Colorado River, I, in my role here at Central, work through an interlocal agreement with the Colorado River Authority of Utah. Today I'm going to briefly discuss some of the issues and policy changes on the Colorado River and how Utah's reacted to the Colorado by creating the Colorado River Authority of Utah, the need for irrigation demand management programs in Utah, and utilizing OpenET as a tool to help develop, research, and implement demand management programs in Utah, as well as some future potential uses of OpenET and changes in Utah water policy as we move forward. All right. In the last several years, and I'm sure most people here in this room already know, Colorado River has been seeing a major decline in storage due to low inflow and continued use. A few years ago, Utah was at a moment on the river where we felt the need to better protect our water supplies. The 2007 guidelines were about to expire, and the 2019 drought contingency plans called for demand management. Utah was at this point in time where we needed a hero. And one of the things I did before I came here today, I asked my 12-year-old son, I was like, what can I do to make this presentation a little more interesting to everyone? And he told me I needed to include AI. And so I asked AI, what does a hero for Utah on the Colorado River look like? Unfortunately, a hero is not someone in a cape looking over the Colorado River like AI is depicting here. The hero for Utah actually looks like this, the Colorado River Authority of Utah. A few years ago, in 2021, Utah decided to create their own hero and to become a leader in the Colorado River. They created this new state agency with the mission to preserve, or to protect, conserve, use, and develop Utah's waters of the Colorado River system. Through its creation, it's noted the authority may advise, support, gather information, and provide input to the River Commissioner. And they work across all levels of government. So they work with our sister agencies within the state of Utah. So they work with the Division of Water Rights and Division of Water Resources, as well as interstate relationships and the federal government. One of the key things to the success and why I'm here as a water user representing Colorado River Authority of Utah is the authority is comprised of a board of water users or individuals that represent water users in Utah. And so that board and the chairman of that board is actually the general manager of Central Utah Water Conservancy District. And that's been one of the key reasons why it's been so successful with its recent 2 years of development. However, Utah's not done yet. The Utah State Legislature realized that we needed some tools in order to equip this new state agency with the ability to implement its programs and practices. And so last year, SB 114, which modified Utah's in-stream flow statute, allowed for water projects to free up water according to a Colorado River drought contingency plans or DCPs through the 2019 DCP or through any other demand management program to be stored in a reservoir within Utah. The change application that would be required for that would need the sign-off and authority from the executive director of the Colorado River Authority of Utah. On top of that, the state legislature create SB 277, which is a crucial bill creating the Ag Water Optimization Program, but also quantified and described saved water as being a beneficial use of water. And so now there's this ability through Utah's codification of this saved water ability for farmers to use optimization of their water or their management practices to monetize that water and apply it to a demand management program to be stored and used for later uses. All of this resulted in us needing a water shepherd. I don't know, shepherding water is a little bit difficult here, so I wondered what AI thought a water shepherd would look like. So in order for us to functionally shepherd water, we need some tools. We need some canes, we need some sheepdogs, we need some ability to actually get that water moved through the system. And so the authority set up this 5-year management plan, and this 5-year management plan has 3 legs to it. The 3 legs are measurement, hydrology operations, and drought mitigation. The key components and links to OpenET rely on the measurement and the drought mitigation measures, which leads us to the 5-year contract that the authority entered into with OpenET. This contract has 2 components. The first component was to focus on data improvement, which involved looking at crop type and land use, and then improving methods on the effective precipitation, and ultimately resulting in a historic data production for all of the Colorado River Basin of Utah. And then the next component is the data comparison, where we compared crop coefficient methods, and this up here, sorry, I should turn this way instead, is the Hill Report. The Hill Report is an old report that was produced by USU that used crop coefficient methods that the state engineer's office actually utilizes for most of their change applications. So when they're trying to determine the consumptive use of a water right, they turn to and cite this report when the state engineer's office is making decisions through these change application processes. And so we compared OpenET to that report. And in addition to that, we've been comparing the OpenET with eddy covariance towers on the ground. And the authority has been investing very heavily in the Utah Flex Network through the Utah Geological Survey. They've installed 6 new EC towers, and we've been using those EC towers to ground truth that OpenET data. So, I apologize, there's a lot of AI in this. I asked again, what does an instrument look like that is measuring consumptive use in the Colorado River Basin? And this is what AI came up with. So now that the authority is utilizing and ground truthing the ET data from OpenET, we're looking at practical applications. How do we apply this to a demand management program? How do we shepherd that water through Colorado River? So Central Utah Water Conservancy District and the authority jointly funded a research with Jacobs to look at the overall potential of ag resiliency within Utah's Colorado River Basin. And that, the link between that study and OpenET resides in the water demand analysis, which I have highlighted here, where it compares Utah's water budget model for the state of Utah that was developed by Utah's Division of Water Resources against OpenET data. This project is being discussed further this afternoon by Scott Morrison from Jacobs, so I'm not going to go into more detail on this, so I don't want to steal his thunder. So, in addition to that, as a joint effort between Central Utah and the authority as well, we've been doing some ag resiliency implementation. This is a program that we implemented with Utah State University called Ag Drip. And this program connects on-the-ground farmers with education and information on how to better manage their irrigation practices. The program currently has 125 farms with 50 different irrigation companies, and it implements different irrigation practices where a farmer can choose to change their crop type, and then they're given soil moisture sensors, and it incentivizes water use reporting and creating management plans and utilizing those soil moisture sensors to better their irrigation management. Presently, this is a picture of all of the currently participating farms. The top chart here shows the farms that are participating in different crop types, and then the bottom chart shows those that have utilized the soil moisture data to better their irrigation practices. This program could be expanded in the future to inform and educate farmers on how to use OpenET data so that they can see how their irrigation management practices are affecting their consumptive use long term. Oh, too fast. So I asked AI what an harvesting ag water resiliency in Utah would look like. And this is what I got. I had another really funny one. These can be kind of interesting, and I'm not quite certain what's happening here, but I think it's dragging pipes along. All right. I know, right? So which leads me to our final tool, and the one that Forrest kind of mentioned before I came up here, the Utah Colorado River Accounting and Forecasting Model. UCRAF in short. This is a riverware model that's been developed by a team from Precision Water Resources Engineering and Fulham Hydrologic Solutions. It's been put together to kind of answer planning questions related to demand management programs. Some of those questions are: how much conserved water do drought mitigation measures produce? What are the most effective measures to producing conserved water? And in what conditions will programs be successful? The first component, so there's two components to UCRAF monitoring. The first component is where OpenET comes in. This is the diversion runoff calculator. The diversion runoff calculator takes field scale consumptive use from OpenET and then adds in efficiencies to come up with a canal total sum of what is needed, what the demand of that canal company or diversion up the river is. And then that diversion number is actually truthed up by taking historical physical water measurements that have been diverted into those canals. And then that diversion runoff calculator acts as a connection to a riverware model, which is a established basin modeling platform that allows rule-based simulations and accounting of water rights. And the two models are linked together by allowing the diversion runoff calculator to be inputted as one of the main components of the riverware model's demands. At the end result of developing this model, we end up with a baseline of the current conditions of all the agricultural practices that are happening in a given river basin that we're modeling. And we can use that baseline model to start asking questions. Sorry, there's a lot of clicks on this one. So some of those questions include, what happens if we line canals? How does that change the return flow, the diversion out of the river system? What happens if we fallow fields? Does that impact anyone downstream? Are we getting some measurable water out of that? Are we able to even quantify it through a theoretical planning model? And what if we change our irrigation practices or crop type? What's the overall effect of that long term when it comes to applying and planning and having a demand management program? So we now have a water shepherd that is also a hero, and he's flying. So what's next? The Colorado River Authority of Utah has now been under a process in the last couple months of procuring a consultant to implement a pilot demand management program. We're hoping to have a pilot studies done by 2025. And we're going to use the OpenET to estimate the conserved consumptive use, and we're going to use these UCRAF models to kind of help plan with the development of that. In addition to that, Utah is not done with water policy. I think we've gone through several years of water in the legislative session. Presently, the Utah State Engineer's Office has been going through a rulemaking process. I've been sitting on that rulemaking committee where they're determining a depletion and duty value rule. And in the discussions of the consumptive use analysis of water rights in Utah, there was the tendency to run back to that Hill report that's been used. But in general, the majority of the individuals sitting on that committee said that we need to utilize the best available science and codify that in the rule. And so I can see the potential of expanding and the change in using best available science in determining consumptive use, and that could be OpenET. I'm not quite certain what the State Engineer's Office is planning on doing, but that is a possibility. In addition to that, this year we also had another change to the saved water definition, where it grants the state engineer rulemaking authority to quantify and define what saved water is through a rulemaking process. Since we're not done with the duty and depletion value rulemaking process yet, I kind of see that one coming and joining in that effort, but the state engineer's office could move into a different rulemaking process that could dive into how you quantify and define saved water in Utah. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And I should note that along with Oregon, Utah was, I think, one of the first two states to start integrating data from OpenET into state water data information systems. And I think that was something I first started talking about the possibility of with Craig Miller, 10, 12 years ago at a Western States Water Council meeting about the opportunities to use remote sensing of ET and those data products. So it's really gratifying to see this type of work and also to see how quickly Utah is moving in terms of developing, I think, really innovative data-driven systems for responding to potential for future drought and changes in water supply. Really creative and innovative work. And I'll say, like Bart Liefling, honestly, I think can explain OpenET better than I can at this point. I sat down in some meetings recently, and I was like, yeah, that's great. Can I get your talking points, please? And the meetings that we have with Lily Bosworth and Betsy Morgan, I honestly look forward to. When I see those meetings on my calendar, I'm like, oh, boy, I get to talk to the folks in Utah today. So I'm really lucky to have all of those people as partners. Next, I'd like to introduce Jay Ziegler. Jay is the Delta Water Master and manages Delta water rights to protect water quality and other objectives in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. Previously, Jay was the Director of Government and External Affairs in the California Office of the Nature Conservancy, and he has worked extensively around various Delta issues throughout his career. Jay's work has helped advance scientific monitoring of California's water supply, and he's worked actively in developing environmental funding initiatives, endangered species protections, and natural resource management actions across various state and federal agencies. So with that, Jay, I'll let you describe what's happening in the Delta.
Thank you, Forrest. My talk today will kind of take you through a journey on adoption of OpenET as a water data reporting platform in California. And I have to really kind of focus on acknowledgments and admissions here today. I am here, and I think I would be here with another room almost this size of Californians were it not for a state travel ban for state employees, university employees, anyone affiliated with the state of California. So representing a large group of folks that are committed to your work and bringing a great deal of thank you. And at the top of that list, Maurice, Robin, Forrest, thanks for your tireless energy in driving this platform to fruition. On a related basis, really Rachel, Garshaw, and Alex, thank you for this convention. It's really been extraordinary for me to just kind of learn the other applications on OpenET. And finally, Forrest, Will, Jordan, Garshaw, thanks for your continuing commitment to enhance our data reporting platform in California. The second admonition of all of California is that we are behind all of you in the West in our sophistication in water data reporting, water use reporting. So I'm going to take you through a journey that really began in California in 2015 with the adoption of Senate Bill 88, which required water data reporting, water use reporting in the state. In 2015, the kind of underlying principles of that is for major water users, those diverting 10,000 acre-feet or more, there's a telemetry reporting requirement, a real-time reporting requirement for diversions to the State Water Board in real time. There's an exemption on the other end of that for water users using 10 acre-feet or less to actually forego reporting and simply file an acknowledgement of their right. And finally, while this law specifically requires diversion reporting, there is an exemption for feasibility and implementation and cost elements that the state board, and in my case, in the Delta Water Master can make, which we have exercised in using OpenET and as a water data reporting platform. Finally, I will acknowledge that we're the second most controversial watershed for water management in California. I just wanted to give you kind of a quick snapshot of the legal delta in just understanding the complexity that we're working with in California. This region is about 750,000 acres. It is approximately 415,000 irrigated acres. There are 1,300 water rights holders and 2,300 points of diversion. And that mosaic that you see there are comprised of 56 major islands, which are really sinks because they protect agricultural lands that are mostly below sea level. And it is a radically altered landscape. Before the gold rush, that was one giant marsh system. So, and then as you add to this, you go down to the bottom of this map, it's also the diversion point for the state and federal water projects, which in most water years diverts 4 to 6 million acre feet of water from the Delta system. And so that's the complex intersection that we are managing here. And in order to get to this moment, I want to acknowledge the work of my predecessor. I feel something like a relief pitcher coming in the 9th inning with at least a 4-1 lead and moving forward in this data reporting platform. So, exactly. That is a great admission. But I want to, the work in getting to this point, again, began with Senate Bill 88. It involved intensive work with the Delta stakeholder community, led by my predecessor, Michael George, engagement of UC Davis, really tearing off of the work done in Idaho on metric, and helping to really integrate all of this with really active early involvement in OpenET and saying, can we get here in terms of a water data reporting system that can deliver reliable, timely, and accessible data for all stakeholders interested in water in California. And so it is in this list, and I'd especially like to acknowledge the work of Brett Baker. I feel like I am, again, that relief pitcher, your evangelist, and I'm riding on all of your shoulders, but especially Brett's shoulders. And so, Brett, if you might stand up. Brett is at the Central Delta Water Agency. He has been really the lead proponent. He's also something of a one-stop shop for both understanding your water rights and developing your shape files and helping you integrate your reporting in the system. So we just owe an extraordinary debt to Brett's work in actually really delivering all water users to come to an understanding of what OpenET reporting means and how the data is actually going to be used, and frankly, how it's useful in grounding a substantive conversation and understanding about consumptive use in the California Delta. So this is, so we're writing again on OpenET as our data platform. And what's important, I think, to understand is that the system is really integrated using 2 APIs, one linking to OpenET and one to the state's data management system. It's a report management system, which is at best described as a bundle of Scotch tape, duct tape, glue, and improvisation in trying to discern actual water data reporting in the state. So I am happy to report that we're in the midst of a data modernization project in California, and the OpenET platform will be uploaded into that modernization effort to continue to facilitate water reporting, especially in the legal delta. And what I am particularly excited about, and many of you in the room will roll your eyes at this is the first water reporting platform in California that actually aligns a point of diversion with a place of use, and through shape files that identify all of those 2,300 points of diversion and where water is applied on the ground. And additionally, again, this is a lot of credit goes to Brett and the team at Central Delta Water Agency, the South Delta Water Agency, and the community that really adopted OpenET as the preferred water data reporting platform. And I'm especially pleased that we're getting, in year 1 of our reporting effort, Water Year 22, we got very close to 80% reporting on this platform for an alternative compliance plan. And so there are a number, we have about 30 alternative compliance plans in the Delta, but we are trying to migrate all of those alternative compliance plan reporters and those direct diversion reporters in the system onto the Delta ACP platform. It's my hope next year that we're above 90% or 95% adoption on a singular data reporting platform. And I think that's helpful because then rather than looking at multiple data sets, we're looking at one data set to understand consumptive use in the Delta. And finally, I think the benefits to this system. I mean, it's really critical that we've reduced user cost of compliance. As I noted, we have some 2,300 points of diversion in the Delta. What we have found in our work throughout the Delta over a 7-year implementation period is that data from siphon metering devices is inherently unreliable. And so not only are we getting an ease of use and more economical use for agricultural diverters, but at the same time, that data is much more accurate and much more reliable in gaining a better understanding of water use and consumptive use in the Delta. So what we've really seen here is that we're building on a platform to educate all water users, all water interests, state and federal projects, everyone in the system, to better understand actual consumptive use. And this will be an inherently critical architecture to really drive effective water management in the Delta in California. And so I just want to thank you all for the work that you're doing. We have to succeed together. And there's no pressure in this, but we don't really have an alternative plan B in California for water data reporting. We kind of run a back of the envelope calculation that if some of the advocates for direct diversion reporting were to succeed in applying that standard of having siphon diversion meters on all diversions, that would be a $29 million proposition in the state. So that might be absorbable for some of the larger agricultural interests, but it's certainly not an absorbable cost for average farmers in the Delta. So a debt of gratitude to you all, and no pressure again, but I'm riding on all your shoulders. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay. I will note that for me, one of the personal highlights of working on OpenET was one of the Delta Measurement Consortium meetings where one of the landowners talked about the experience, I think mostly of picking on the data, but noted that process of trying to work through how they could use OpenET, how it might work as an alternative to meters, really brought the water management agencies, the regulators, and the landowners from a place of direct conflict to collaboration, and he even described it as now a point of friendship, right? And so seeing a community move from a point of conflict to a place of collaboration to come up with a win-win solution that saves people time and money while providing more consistent information, I mean, that is what we are trying to do. And people have asked me, well, how can you replicate that? And I said, well, it's really easy. You just have to find somebody who's a fifth-generation farmer with training in law, GIS, and fisheries biology, who also tells amazing hunting stories. And if you can find someone like that, it's super easy and you're done, right? So I really want to acknowledge Brett for all of his leadership and what he's done in the Delta. It's so much fun to work with you. Thank you. So thank you very much, Jay. Next, I'd like to introduce Jordan Beamer, who'll be batting cleanup for our panel. Jordan developed an interest in the environment and background in water and agriculture early on. One of his first jobs growing up was changing handline and spreading manure. Since 2016, he has worked as a hydrologist in the Oregon Water Resources Department and is currently the ET and Water Use Program Coordinator. He is collaborating with research from the Desert Research Institute, OpenET, and USGS to develop and apply OpenET data sets to compute actual ET and consumptive use from irrigated lands statewide. Oregon, I want to acknowledge, is one of the earliest adopters and champions for OpenET, and Jordan's leadership has been fundamental to that. You have been such a good partner and friend to OpenET for many years, so I'll let you describe what's happening in Oregon now.
All right, thanks, Forrest. And thanks again to the OpenET team and everyone involved with organizing this amazing conference. It's so great to have everyone here. So today, presenting on the use of OpenET in Oregon to support updated water budgets and planning throughout the state, kind of representing the State Water Agency usage of the data. So Oregon, despite what many think, is not just a rainy state. There's large areas that are semi-arid and require substantial irrigation. And OWRD is the state agency that manages water rights and really works towards sustainable, responsible water management, uses evapotranspiration data for a variety of uses, including what I'm talking about today, developing updated water budgets across the state. And we do groundwater basin studies, place-based planning efforts, water conservation efforts, trying to quantify water savings. We've got water availability program where we used to allocate surface water, groundwater across the state, develop demand forecasts for planning, and then our water rights division utilizes ET information for a variety of things. We've gone through a series of meetings with stakeholders around sort of the adoption of satellite-based ET, and at this point we're really focusing our efforts to use OpenET, satellite-based ET, for those top four that we have in the asterisk. So in 2021, the Oregon legislature provided a big amount of funding and support for the Water Resources Department. This was led partially by the leadership of State Representative Mark Owens. And one of those is House Bill 2018, which included funding and directed the Water Resources Department to complete a statewide consumptive use study to quantify water use from irrigated fields, open water evaporation from the major reservoirs for this time period, 1984 through 2020. And really the focus of this effort was towards updating these water budgets, and specifically kind of around groundwater. So this House Bill 2018 really leverages multiple years of work and partnerships that our agency has developed, which kind of started when I started with the department on a NASA ROSES grant, where OWRD was a partner on this effort and involved in the development of OpenET and some of the beta testing. And then this sort of, with the leadership of Forrest and Justin Huntington at DRI, kind of spawned into a whole program at the Water Resources Department, where we've got a number of grants from the USGS, the WOOTER program, NASA, JPL, Western Water Application Office, and then also the state funding to really help fund and support work to update our field boundary data sets, attribute irrigation information, OpenET, working with partners from Oregon State, Idaho, and Washington Department of Ecology to develop this Columbia River Basin mapping tool was a really awesome opportunity. And now that we're transitioning into this statewide consumptive use report and the summarizing satellite-based ET for long periods of time, and then expanding our agricultural weather station expansion network. That was one of the big things the value of highly accurate field boundaries and a robust agricultural weather network have really become apparent. So in terms of the agricultural field boundaries, we started out with around 91,000 fields in Oregon, based largely on the Common Land Unit data set. And our partners at DRI, led by Matt Bromley, did a lot of manual digitizing of field boundaries across the state using a variety of imagery products and water rights data. And now we're over 250,000 agricultural fields mapped across the state that sort of represent the maximum irrigated extent. And these are really the foundational building blocks for our usage of the satellite-based ET for irrigation. And we can use them to aggregate to county, watershed, administrative basin scales. For the ear mapper product is what we're using to attribute to the mapped field. So essentially computing the percent irrigated for every field across the state annually across the whole period of record back to 1984. And this really allows us to sort and filter out unirrigated fields when we're doing kind of basin-wide inventories of surface and groundwater use. Since we're ultimately wanting to estimate applied water by basically taking the satellite-based ET or net ET divided by an efficiency on a field scale, another large effort was to manually attribute system type and an average efficiency value for all of these irrigated fields across the state. So this is a snapshot from the Walla Walla Basin in north central Oregon, kind of showing the variety of, there's a lot of center pivot irrigation, and then we've got, micro drip, sprinkler irrigation, and orchards and part of that. So we're capturing that spatial variability and irrigation efficiency. And then in order to quantify the surface water, groundwater use, we're using our water rights data and attributing that to the agricultural fields to, so this kind of shows an example from an irrigated basin in the Powder River, northeast Oregon, where we've got a mixture of groundwater rights, surface water rights, and then water rights where we've got stacked surface water and groundwater. So I'm preaching to the choir here, but so in order to get accurate satellite-based ET, one of the big inputs is the grass reference reference ET. And so, agricultural weather stations, primarily from the AgriMet network, were compared with the GridMet grass reference ET to basically apply a ratio of station grass reference over gridded grass reference. And this was done for 27 different stations. We've also got an eddy covariance station that's located down in Harney County on Mark Owen's field that was used both as to compare with the grass reference ET, but also since we had measurements of actual ET, the team compared the ensemble ET from OpenET with that and found really good comparisons. And this sort of, along with the recently published intercomparison study, led us to move forward with using the ensemble value. So through our contract with OpenET, the team produced and delivered statewide maps of ET rasters for individual models and an ensemble calculation for 38 years, 1985 through 2022. Tremendous data set. I was like tearing up when I found out that it had been completed, just because of all the work that's gone into this. And so we're currently able to access the data set through a custom API that Will has set up. And I just can't thank the team enough for all the effort that went into this. This is a map of the Deschutes Basin. Some of the fields are where I used to change handline. So for effective precipitation, we're using the ET demands model. And so the DRI team employed ET demands. We basically have it statewide on a 4-kilometer grid cell, monthly data and daily output back to 1985. And the team at DRI took the mapped agricultural fields with crop type and was able to pair the ET demands output with each of those fields so that we could get an estimate of OpenET and effective precip to calculate consumptive use. And then taking all that field level ET and consumptive use data and summarizing it to watershed scale, HUC 8 level watersheds. So we're getting both the kind of the area weighted rate on a monthly and annual basis, as well as the volumetric in acre feet. So this is just a quick example of a map that Blake from DRI created, showing the area averaged consumptive use rates for the different HUC 8 watersheds across the Oregon study area. And this is averaged through the 1985 through 2022 time period, kind of showing the spatial variability where we've got, for actively irrigated crops, high ET rates. Southeast Oregon along the Columbia River in northern Oregon, and then much lower consumptive use rates along the coast where it rains a lot, and in some parts of the Willamette Valley. So for water budgets, again, we really want the volumetric data. So this is basically taking that area average consumptive use rate multiplied by the irrigated acreage, where really the big irrigation projects really stick out. In the Klamath Basin, along the Snake River, Oahe River in eastern Oregon, along the Columbia River in northern Oregon, where we've got volumes exceeding 300,000 acre feet per year. And then, much smaller volumes in some of the coastal watersheds. This is a plot that was recently put together by DRI, and this is kind of zooming into one of those individual HUC 8s where we can really start to look at the patterns and changes in evapotranspiration and consumptive use through time. It's a really, there's a lot going on in this plot. Essentially on the left-hand side, we've got the volumetric, the monthly and annual volumes, and then on the right-hand side are the area average rates for that watershed. And this is a watershed that's primarily driven by groundwater irrigation in south central Oregon. And in terms of volumetrically, we can see that growing season, May through September volume start to increase through time, back, starting in 1985 and moving forward. We can also see the ET rate, ET volume, and net ET volume, or consumptive use volume, increasing through time. And this is largely due to that increase in irrigated acreage in that watershed. And then on the right-hand side shows the rates, and I think it is interesting to note how both the ET and the net ET rates do show an increasing trend as we look at that historical record. So in terms of applications, just real quick, we're using this data in the Walla Walla groundwater basin study. This is a study we're partnering up with the USGS. And this, what we really like about OpenET and just satellite-based ET in general is that we can use it, meets the USGS needs, avoids a lot of the assumptions that we've historically had to make for doing irrigation water use estimates. We get that longer time series, and then a big one, since this was a watershed that is in Oregon and in Washington, is that we have this consistent data set that we can use both on the Oregon side and the Washington side. And so, and we do see the plot on the bottom is kind of showing the time series of that net ET volume through time, where we see a pretty substantial increase, especially after around 2010 from some increasing groundwater development in that basin. So since Jama Hamill's not here from Agromet, I did want to highlight this Agromet station expansion. So this is funding that Water Resources Department and Oregon State received in the 2023 session for 30 new Agromet stations. So we've been working with Jama. She's like a total workhorse and amazing. She's already installed, I think, 13 of the stations in kind of Southeast Oregon and Northwest Oregon, and we'll be installing the rest in those yellow stars over the next couple months. But this is really an effort to kind of fill the gap in our agricultural weather network. And we're also providing funds for her to hire an additional staff person to help with the installation and running of those additional stations. So in terms of next steps, working with the OpenET team to complete a review of the historical satellite-based ET data sets for Oregon for all the models and the ensemble value. And then some trainings. We're wrapping up a report with DRI that summarizes some of those figures that I showed and the Walla Walla Basin study. And then I'll put a plug in for Maria's talk later today, but she's going to talk about this House Bill 2010 work where funding has been provided to Oregon State to help with this Agromet expansion and then the continuation of ET data production in Oregon, kind of trying to build off of all this work that we've done so far to create that historical record moving forward. And then also leading a technical advisory committee to help with further validation in Oregon and recommending uses in the state. So with that, thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jordan. And Oregon is really exciting to see the first state that we've been able to produce the long-term historic archive, and looking forward to seeing the applications there. And I know that AJ Purdy and Peter and Blake and Alberto on the OpenET team have all been doing really nice work on developing some automated routines to help us learn from what we've done in Oregon and do automated or largely automated checks on the data sets, and that's going to help us greatly as we work towards expanding the historic data production for other regions and states. And I know that the work, Jordan, that you did with Matt Bromley and Maria Zamora-Ray and Phil Blankino and Jeff Marty on the Columbia River Basin ET mapping tools has been a real highlight for the Western Water Applications Office and one they always talk about. So thank you for all of that work. So I'd planned all these really fun questions for the panel. Things like who has a tattoo of the Penman-Monteith equation? Like, what's your favorite Rick Allen paper? Which Martha Anderson paper do you read to your kids at night? Like, I had all these great questions, but we're going to skip those in the interest of time. If you have questions for the panelists, please come grab them at the break. I do want to just offer a few closing thoughts. Most importantly, shuttles will be taking you to the airport at 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. right out front. See, Rachel, I didn't forget, I promise. Yeah, okay. So if you need a shuttle to the airport, 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. right after lunch, right out front. I also want to thank our panelists again for some really thoughtful remarks and for being such incredible partners and supporters of OpenET over the years, so thank you all. I also want to acknowledge Robin Grimm. Where's Robin? Robin, can you stand up for a minute? Robin served as the first executive director for the OpenET nonprofit, did a phenomenal job sort of shepherding us through that transition process and keeping OpenET running and building and strengthening many of these partnerships. So thank you, Robin, and Maurice, for your leadership. And Maurice Hall for your leadership in keeping this going and helping us continue to grow and expand, and for the outstanding work supported by Gershaw, Alex, and Rachel to build and support and nurture many of these partnerships and see them through to success. Lastly, I want to thank Rachel again for an incredible 2 days here, just a delightful experience, highlight of my year. for sure, and something that was so thoughtfully and lovingly planned. Thank you for doing such a superb job. Really, thank you. And so that we'll move on to our next set of sessions here. So we'll take about 15 minutes for coffee, grab the speakers, ask them questions. Again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you all for being here. Such a wonderful community of folks. Something I'm excited about is seeing the connections and conversations develop, new partnerships and new opportunities evolve. So I'll stop talking and let those conversations continue. Thank you again. Safe travels home. Thank you for being here.